Hello, fantasy managers, and welcome to another video from myself, Will, and fantasyfootballhub.co.uk. We've got lots to go over this week, so we're recording this on Tuesday night, so we're just before the Spurs and Brighton matches. And I'm joined by none other than Richard Clarke, who has a brilliant FPL record that goes back all the way to 2006 and 2007. So Richard's playing a really, really long time, and he has one of the best fantasy football or FPL records out there. Most of his finishes have been in or around the top 10,000, and he hasn't, since 2006-7 season, he hasn't finished higher than 32,500. Welcome, Richard.
Hi, Will. Thank you for having me.
So it's a pleasure that you're on, and you've started contributing to the hub recently. So I try and get all our contributors on at some point. And you've obviously one of the best records out there. Just tell us a little bit about how you got into FPL, and maybe some of your strategies for success.
Okay. So long ago, I can't remember how I got into it. I think I took part in a work mini league, like many, to start with, where someone just encouraging me to have a go, and then got the bug myself and carried on playing with a certain amount of due diligence to begin with. But things were very different 12 years ago, 13 years ago to what they are now. And I think that initially, if you did put the effort in and the time in, you could finish with quite a comfortable ranking. I've always been quite a patient player. I've always played on fixtures. Quite importantly, would be my overriding driver, looking at players and fixtures and top 6 versus bottom 14, that kind of strategy. Yeah. A strong amount of personal time put into analysing forthcoming fixtures, upcoming transfers, probably via more manual methods than are available today, but always having that same sort of diligent approach to doing the analysis and planning things well in advance.
Yeah, very, very good points there. And what over the years, what do you think's changed in your approach, or has nothing changed? Are things you've had to do more of?
Well, like many will say, I think just sheer amount of information that's now available to the community and to players now from our own site and other sites that provide that. So it's really about processing all that information, and that's led to more hours of time being put into it. But really, then just choosing which information to ignore and choosing which information to go with. Ultimately, the most important decision is still probably around which captain to choose every week. There's a huge amount of information that helps now make that captain decision a little bit more straightforward, and you can make very safe choices quite quickly. But if you are going to be bolder and make a slight differential choice, then that requires a lot more thought. So that's still. I still really play the same fundamentals, but I just have a lot more information to process now. The game's getting harder. There's more players playing seriously. So it's hard to, repeat a top ranking every year. So,
well, you're doing pretty well this season again, up to 23,000, having a good double game week. I see. Poured in Delafeu. Tell us a little bit about this season and how it's been going for you.
Okay. Yeah, this season's been a bit of a struggle. I haven't obviously given up on getting another top 10k finish, with a good finish to the season, hopefully with a good night tonight and tomorrow. I can get into the top 20k this week, and then it's all about working to a high finish. I have found it quite a frustrating season. I think it's been quite unpredictable. At key times. My column talks a little bit about the fairly common pattern of free hitting in 32 and wild carding in 34, etc., which is probably the most popular approach recently. The timing of those chips, I think, has had a number of unpredictable results and a number of unpredictable things happen during those key periods, and that can be obviously lead to some quite variable results for people. So I'm okay with how it's been going, but I just feel like I've been treading water. I've been going up one week, slipping down the next, up one week, slipping down the next. So I need to kind of try and break through that. It might be time for a few more differentials in the last few weeks. It might be time to gamble a bit, because just playing safe and having the same sort of players is probably just going to lead to similar sort of results. Is my thoughts. I'm not underwhelmed, but I'm finding it difficult to get up to that top end K.
Yeah, it's moving in the right direction though for you. I've been following you obviously with the site posts, and it is creeping up there slowly but surely. And that Delafea was a good shout. Just going back to the chip strategy briefly, would you have done anything different, or do you think you had the right strategy? There was just because obviously it has paid off to a certain extent, but you maybe thought you could have boosted you up even more. Or is it just down to luck, or would you have done something different?
I think if I was going to go back, I would probably have played the same. I think one of my mini league rivals is on a completely different strategy, if you call it that. He hasn't had any chips left for ages, and has therefore held on to a lot of individual players rather than double game week players, has gone into the doubles with a far lower amount of double game week players, and that doesn't seem to have done him too much harm. And that's one learning I've taken from that. If you retain players like Hazard, you've kept your Bournemouth players at the right time, you've hung on to players like Luca Dean, etc. They've tended to pay back, even though they've only had a single game week, and therefore sort of a patient strategy, not worrying too much about having double game week players and just making the numbers game has been something that I've noticed. So perhaps not, just loading up on double game week players. Obviously, the Brighton situation, that I've still got 3 Brighton defenders, including the keeper. Got a bit fortunate at the weekend with the clean sheet away to Wolves, but this is the week you wouldn't expect to get many points from your Brighton players. The 2 home games were where it seemed the logical thing to do, and it didn't pay off. Conceded 7 goals at home in 2 games they had to win. But again, I wouldn't do anything different. I'd probably maybe not go 3 defenders, but maybe I'd still definitely have gone 2, just because of the logic and the probability that were associated with those games. And I very much sort of think in that way, really.
Yeah, no, I stay by going with the Brighton defenders. I think we got a bit lucky this week, but probably a bit unlucky last week. Okay, so if we move on to some community questions, then first one is from Fancy Guard FPL, who I actually know, and this guy is, I believe he's top 10 in the world. So he's doing very well. From your perspective, you mentioned differentials earlier, and that you were thinking about bringing in a few more differentials because you thought that you were treading water. What differentials are you personally look at, and maybe for others?
Okay. Well, obviously, I'll name the obvious one now, which is Delafeu. I know he's 5.3% owned, but I'll count that as a still a fairly low ownership for a differential. I had him in just after the Cup semi-final, where he scored that unbelievable goal and really showed what talent he had. And also last week, was one of many who suffered from the Troy Deeney being in my side. Getting rid of Deeney was an obvious thing to do, but still having Delafeu, I think that just boosted his chances of starting over the next 3 weeks, which is obviously one of the fears of getting him in, was would he start? So I think he's obviously starting tonight. I think he'll carry on starting as long as he stays fit. And obviously he's great now through to the end of the season, potentially with such a cheap price and such a talent. So I definitely would recommend him if you haven't already got him in your teams. I got rid of Deeney for Danny Ings. Now, Danny Ings is another much discussed player. He's in my team, brought him in to save a little bit of money. One eye on the last day of the season where he plays Huddersfield at home. I think there could be a lot of goals in that game. But he's going to sit on my bench for the next 2 or 3 weeks after tonight. And therefore, he's not much money. He allows me to play a 3-5-2 and use the money elsewhere. But also you've got that game week 38 game against Huddersfield that even if he doesn't start, he's got a chance of scoring a goal off the bench. So that was my logic behind Danny Ings. And then I would obviously mention now after the hat trick at the weekend, I'd mention Perez from Newcastle as another option.
Yeah, we've got a question coming up actually from Paul that asks, what to do with Gray and Wilson.
Yeah.
Would you look at transferring either of those out? I know you've got Ings currently, but would you look at transferring either of those out maybe for Perez?
Yeah, I would probably hang on to Gray, given that a lot of people have brought him in as a reasonable Deeney replacement. He's starting again tonight. I've only given him one game so far. If he scores tonight, I would hang on to him for the rest of the season. So I'd say he was a keep. Whereas Wilson, looking at his fixtures, 2 away games plus Tottenham at home, I think it is in the middle. I would say probably would be a sell for me. Possibly for Perez, possibly for Llorente or somebody like that. If I was just going to give a quick opinion on those two, so one I'd keep, Gray, and Wilson I'd probably move on.
That's interesting.
What do you think?
I was thinking the opposite, actually. To be honest with you,
really? Okay.
I've got Wilson, and part of the reason I got him in was not just for this week. I think that hopefully he's just been performing all season, hasn't he? Whereas Gray, success actually looked a little bit better when he came on for Watford. I know he's starting tonight, but he's. If you look at their points per game, Wilson versus Gray, then Wilson's up at 5.7 or something. Gray's down quite a bit lower. So despite the fixtures, I still think Wilson is probably more of a prime pick. But I like Gray as well. And if you can bench Gray especially, then he is that much cheaper. It's a bit difficult to bench Wilson at that price point. So. Yeah. I think there are positives for both of them, and I'm definitely going to be hanging on to Wilson. I might not play him every week because I've got quite a strong bench boost now. He played that, but if I had Gray, I might considering hanging on to him as well. I think it just depends on your personal team and your current situation.
Yeah,
but both of them, I think.
If this is the biggest issue you've got in your team, then your team must be pretty well set elsewhere. I would just think transfers are so precious that if they're playing and they're starting, they're both reasonable options.
Good. Okay, then moving on to the last community question from Michael, which I won't read it all out, but it's effectively asking about Champions League rotation. So he mentioned Spurs and Man City there, and are Spurs likely to rotate more in the league? And now that City are out of the Champions League, are they going to be putting their first team out every single match in the Premier League and going all guns blazing for that?
Okay. I think, personally, that the Champions League will be more prioritised by Tottenham and perhaps not so much prioritised by Liverpool. I think that's just purely on the basis that Tottenham are desperate to win a trophy, and the Champions League is a great chance. They've got a great chance of getting to the final, and Liverpool equally are desperate to win the league again. And I think that's liable to not lead to a huge amount of rotation with Liverpool. I think there'll be some managed minutes. With regards to the Barcelona match next week. So you may see Trent Alexander-Arnold and Robertson perhaps rested against Huddersfield. But I expect the full team will start. And if once they're 2 or 3-0 up, then they'll probably start hauling off the star players. I think with Spurs, you could see a lot of rotation in the game against West Ham, is it, at the weekend?
Yeah.
And with the exception of Son, who is probably a really good captain or even a triple captain choice, if tonight's game goes well for them, I can see them rotating players like Eriksen and so on, and the defenders again.
Yeah, Son's interesting, wasn't he? Because he's banned for the first leg against Ajax, so you'd expect him to get the minutes.
Yeah.
What about Liverpool's big guns for Huddersfield match? We're jumping the gun slightly here, but we can, going on to the captaincy decision. Do you think there's any chance of Mane or Salah getting benched?
I think there's a small chance of them getting benched. However, that hasn't happened up to this point. I don't think. I think maybe Firmino got benched for a game a few weeks back, but generally the front three tend to start. I think being a Friday game, Liverpool want to put 3 points on the board. They'll want to do it very quickly, and then maybe around 60 minutes you'll see Mane and Salah perhaps coming off if they're comfortable. Even again, they haven't really come off in the past that early when Liverpool have been cruising. So if anything, maybe there won't be such a goal fest as people are anticipating in that match, and they'll just make sure they've got the game won, and then they'll start protecting the star players. If I'm wrong, I'll happily hold my hands up, but I can't see it. However, obviously, like many, I've debated getting a third Liverpool player in this week, and perhaps I can't afford Salah in one move, so I'm not sure whether it's going to be worth going all out to have Salah and Mane in.
Should we move then on to your team and your current sort of thoughts? You mentioned Salah there. You've currently got 2 Liverpool, so you go for a third one. Is that who you're targeting, or what else are you looking at?
I probably, just because of the structure of the team, I will probably stick with that attacking 5 in midfield for the rest of the season. I'll probably leave it because I don't see a lot wrong with it, with the exception of maybe Eriksen getting rotated at the weekend. I think I like all those players, so that's one reason to not change the midfield. I'd probably have to make 2 moves to get Salah in for Eriksen. Not sure it's worth it. The easier move for me and the more logical move for me is probably to move out one of the Brighton defenders, even though they have a home game. Move one of the Brighton defenders out, or even Valerie if he's still sick, and bring in a Liverpool defender like Trent Alexander-Arnold. So that will still give me the 3 Liverpool players for the rest of the season. Double up in the defence, because actually Robertson and Alexander-Arnold could get assists and bonus points in that match against Huddersfield also. So it's like getting another attacker, really.
So
that just has a bit of a better fit to it, because my defence is a little bit weak due to the doubles and therefore carrying 3 Brighton through to the last 2 games of the season probably doesn't make too much sense. So they probably will use my transfer on the defence. The alternative is to get a third City player in. Laporte. I mean, these are players I could have brought in on the wild card, but I chose to play a bit of a waiting game and add a player. But I like Laporte. I think City and Liverpool, if you haven't got your full complement, are definitely good strategies to go for.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think if you haven't already got, the treble up with the City and Liverpool, then those are the guys to target, certainly for this week, with Deulofeu possibly being the exception there. I think he's a really good shout. Moving quickly on to my team, I do have the double up in defence. I don't currently have any Liverpool attack. My plan was to go Eriksen to Mane, because I can afford that in one move. And I think you're right. I think there's a chance that Eriksen might see managed minutes on Saturday. So I'm looking at that move, and that was a planned move, and I can't really see any reason to deviate from that at the moment. And as you said, got the double up in the Liverpool defence. That's been working for me quite well. I think that they are defenders, but as you say, they play pretty much on the wing most of the time. So you got attacking options for them for the rest of the season as well. I do have to say I'm a little bit worried about not having Salah for those remaining fixtures. But there's not really an easy way to get him without losing Sterling, and I don't want to do that easy either. Do you have concerns about that going into that final run?
Yeah, some. I probably put Sterling in my team in my wildcard team with a view to moving him on, but then he's just been so outstanding in some of the Champions League games that he's played, and obviously we've got tomorrow to see what happens. But yes, I don't want to get rid of Sterling. I think he's actually playing better than Salah, regardless of value or form. And so I think I'll keep it as it is. Having Mane, having one Liverpool attacker, I think is essential. I think you've got to have, but Mane, I think, has been matching Salah. And whilst I expect Salah will score, I don't think it will necessarily be all about Salah for the last 3 or 4 games. So I'm quite happy with the two fullbacks and one.
Okay, good. That makes me feel a little bit better.
Yeah. I think you're good. I think you're looking good, and your move is logical as well. Yeah.
So talking about Mane and Salah, I know that we probably both going to have Mane, so we're probably both going to captain him. That's my thinking. Is that where you're going as well?
Only that. Yeah. That I'm having a slight think about Son as the captain.
Of course, yeah.
Home to West Ham. I think is if you don't fancy captaining a Liverpool player because you think there will be rotation, the alternative is Son, who will more than likely play at the weekend because he's suspended for the first leg of the Champions League. So I would say he's if you want a triple captain, you still got your triple captainship, which I do have. It's a really key decision. So you want it on someone who's going to start to begin with, and Mane is a great shout against Huddersfield. I think he's 90% sure to start. So it's Mane or Son for me. And
which way are you leaning if you had to choose now?
Mane, just because it's Huddersfield.
And is that going to be your triple captainship then?
More than likely, yes.
More than likely, Mane triple captain.
Aren't many games left to pick out that really show. I'm a bit wary about doing it in 38. So yeah, more likely going to bring that out this weekend.
And if you had both Mane and Salah this week, what way would you go with the captaincy?
I think if I was buying Salah, only because of the expense and the effort involved, I would probably still gamble and put it on Salah. But I think it was a gamble, and I don't see that much between them. I think Mane is getting more chances, but Salah has a habit of winning penalties and also obviously started scoring again recently. So not much to choose between them. But yeah, I'd probably go Salah if I was bringing him in.
Yeah, it's been that way all season, really, hasn't it? Salah probably just edged Mane in terms of points and underlying numbers, but for the price difference, Mane's actually been the better FPL pick. And I think that for me, that's probably the case until the rest of the season. But that's about it. Just to finish off, if you did enjoy Richard on this channel, and he writes a brilliant column on Fantasy Football Hub. It's a members article, but you get to see his strategies for each game week, and he goes really in depth into those different strategies and talks you through his team and his moves and what moves he's making as well. And you can also give him a follow at Rich Clarke FPL on Twitter. So go do that if you don't already. But otherwise, if you like this video, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Any final words, Richard?
No. Thank you very much for the good words. I'm enjoying writing the column, and any feedback welcome. And hopefully, I wish you all well for the end of the season and your rankings and mini leagues.
Great. Thank you very much. Bye bye then.
Okay. Cheers, Will.